Hi, welcome back to Paying Attention. This is Delon. Today I'm going to be covering growth hormone and some of the unflattering deleterious side effects of it in regards to glucose and insulin resistance via gluconeogenic properties from its inhibition of PI3K and other transcriptional regulatory factors. So growth hormone is known for cellular proliferation, and it's mainly in charge of controlling metabolic substrates and basically just how your other organs process these metabolites, and whether or not they keep homeostatic level of glucose or lipids and proteins in your bloodstream and tissues. So growth hormone is released by your pituitary glands, or your anterior pituitary gland, and it is signaled by your hypothalamus axis, tomato, based on pulsatile secretions. It's increased by androgens such as testosterone or aldosterone or androstenedione, and anything androgenic, and it is also increased by fasting, hunger, and exercise. And what inhibits your pulsatile secretions of growth hormone are going to be insulin, bile from food ingested, and basically anything the opposite of what glucagon or fasting would be. So whenever you eat in a postprandial sense, that would be antagonistic to growth hormone. Yeah, growth hormone is great. It takes it's in charge of cell proliferation, and it targets somatic cells as well as germ cells, but we're just going to be talking about somatic cells today. And so somatic cells are just going to be anything that's not reproductive, or essentially anything other than your follicular or follicle stimulating hormones. So everything else but. And so with growth hormone, as I mentioned before, it has some deleterious effects, and some of those deleterious effects are insulin resistance. And so what I'm doing here today is I am taking a glucometer and I am measuring my glucose, not because I'm diabetic, but because I need to measure it because of the gluconeogenic properties of growth hormone. And so what does that mean? Well, your body has a couple different ways of processing glucose, and a lot of them relate to whether your body's in a fast or feed state. And so when your body's in a feeding state, it secretes insulin from your pancreas and triggers insulin, right? Not insulin, but insulin-like downstream cascades for hormones. Well, when you're on growth hormone, it kind of inhibits some of those processes, mainly PI3K and ACT signaling, and it does this by upregulating PPCK and pyruvate carboxylase, which are both part of the oxaloacetate loop of pyruvate in and outside of the mitochondrial complex. And so what that does additionally to stop glucose from being stored as glycogen, it also converts it into fat or fatty acids via lipogenesis if it is unutilized in a postprandial sense, or even a post-workout sense. So why does that matter? Well, because if it's doing this when it's supposed to be storing glycogen, and you are not eating, and you just worked out and you just broke up a bunch of triglycerides from the lipolytic effects of the growth hormone, well, you're gonna have not only a bunch of free glucose that hasn't been burnt off because it inhibits glucose oxidation through PDK4, which is an inhibitory protein kinase of pyruvate dehydrate complex, which is responsible for turning your pyruvate into acetyl-CoA, or coenzyme 8, into the tricarboxylic acid cycle. So when you have that extra pyruvate, it's going to either be turned into extrahepatic glucose, if we're strictly speaking about the liver, or it's going to be turned into fat, or it's just going to turn into lactate, and then if it's in a muscle cell, then recirculate into your liver and then turn into glucose. And so now you have a lot of hepatic glucose production in your bloodstream, which can lead to hyperglycemia. And so that is where I currently am right now in my bodybuilding journey of human growth hormone. Is I have a lot of PPCK and PC activation that's limiting my PDC from being oxidized in the TCA cycle. So that will eventually, after my workout, after I phosphorylate the, ironically, glycogen phosphorylate into glycolysis, and I'm done with my workout, that extra lactate or diglycerate is going to either turn into lactate, increase insulin resistance, and then mosey its way back into the liver and de facto turn into hepatic glucose production, which can also lead to worst case non-alcoholic liver, fatty liver disease, or just hepatic steatosis, which is more than 5% of what your liver is supposed to be as far as glucose content. So that is what I'm doing right here. It's a pretty simple step. So basically you're just going to take, I don't know if you've ever used a glucose meter, but insert the strip just like that. It gives you a little indicator on the number, and it tells you the batch number of the strips, and it's supposed to add up or match, so you get the right strip. And it lasts a pretty long time, so there's not really any rush. to poke yourself with this little needle thing. I usually stick it all the way up to 8 or 10, but it's got a depth gauge on it, and you just press on your finger like so, let it eject, and then you can press on your thumb or wherever you poked, and it'll just kind of draw it in there and give you a reading. I didn't go deep enough. It didn't give me a reading that time. But that's basically how it works. I'll give you, you can do it post-prandial or after you eat, or you can also do it in a fasted state, get a more accurate reading. I like to do it both just to see what my range is. But that's one of the steps I'm taking to counteract the insulin resistance of the cell proliferating postnatal hormone known as growth hormone that's responsible for bone growth, muscle growth, connective tissue growth, and basically just homeostatic metabolism in your whole body, and it's what is primarily responsible for either gigantism or dwarfism if you have a lack of it, and it's kind of what you get when you go through puberty. So that's why sport athletes use it to dope, because it's really hard to test for because the recombinant growth hormone is almost identical to the actual growth hormone that is released in your body. So yeah, it's a very potent drug, and definitely be, if you're going to use it, be aware of some of the glycemic effects that can have hyper sensitive issues to glucose, and maybe find alternatives that I'll go over in future videos. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.